hell in our popular imagination and countless artistic and literary representations is invariably portrayed with impactful visual and auditory elements, crackling flames consuming flesh, agonizing screams of souls in eternal torment, and demonic figures inflicting suffering. This traditional iconography has accustomed us to conceive of hell as a place of extreme physical and auditory punishment. However, the sharp and profound Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, with his unique thought, invites us to a much darker, introspective, and perhaps for that reason, even more terrifying reflection. He proposes that hell does not begin with purifying or destructive fire, but rather in an insidious and almost imperceptible way, with silence. It's an oppressive silence, a terrifying silence, a silence that settles deeply and irremediably in the soul when a person loses themselves, enveloped in a dense, sticky fog of self-denial and a despair that disguises itself. This silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the absence of life, of truth, of connection. For Kierkegaard, hell transcends the notion of a physical location. It is, first and foremost, a state of mind, an existential condition of the human soul. It manifests as the unbearable feeling of no longer recognizing oneself in the mirror of one's own existence, of having, unconsciously or not, put on a social mask, perhaps imposed by external expectations, perhaps created by a yearning for acceptance or success, and of having forgotten it on one's face for so long that, tragically and ironically, the person begins to believe, with a disturbing conviction, that this mask has become their very essence, their true identity. This isn't a hell of external divine punishment, with demons lurking at every corner. It is, on the contrary, a despair so deeply rooted, so silent in its manifestation, and so intimate in its nature that, most of the time, the person isn't even aware they are immersed in it. They live, breathe, and interact with the world, but in a condition of profound alienation from their true self. Outwardly, the life of someone in this silent hell can appear impeccably normal and even enviable. The person might smile easily at social gatherings, perform their professional duties with apparent mastery, publish carefully edited photos on social media, cultivating and maintaining a facade of unshakable normalcy and happiness. However, behind this curtain of appearances, deep within the soul, the person is in ruins. The greatest pain, Kierkegaard argues, does not lie in material deprivation, lack of resources, or physical suffering, however distressing these may be. The true agony lies in the incapacity to inhabit one's own soul, to live in congruence with one's most authentic being, to be truly and fully oneself. It's the experience of being a stranger to oneself, an exile in one's own inner home. Kierkegaardian, hell is the ultimate expression of self-alienation, a relentless and desperate flight from one's own self. This continuous evasion, this expanding existential void, this deepening inner abyss with each inauthentic choice, is what the philosopher terms despair. This despair doesn't manifest as an audible cry of anguish, a piercing wail that draws attention. On the contrary, it's a silent, unanswered echo, a sound that doesn't reverberate because there's no wall to bounce it back. It's the soul that, in its stubbornness and pride, refuses to accept who it is in its deepest essence, that denies its inherent dependence on something greater, be it God, the Absolute, or the very truth of its finitude and fragility. Instead of surrendering to authenticity, it strives to build illusory castles of identity, social image, and material success, all to avoid confronting the existential void that haunts it and threatens to engulf it. In this painful process of denial and self-sabotage, the soul fragments, disintegrating into disconnected parts. It becomes, metaphorically, two entities, one that presents itself to the external world with a carefully crafted, controlled, and often brilliant image, and another that watches this performance in sepulchral silence, suffocated under layers of inauthenticity, buried alive under the weight of expectations and constructed lies. This is the deepest and most tragic essence of hell for Kierkegaard. The internal division of the soul, the loss of its center that sustains it, the obstinate refusal of the truth about oneself. The more the soul insists on denying and refusing to accept its own truth, its true identity, and its inherent fragility, the more deeply it sinks into this abyss, reaching a point of no return. This point isn't reached because God has abandoned or rejected it. It's reached because the soul itself has disintegrated to such an extent that, tragically, it has forgotten how to be whole, how to reconnect with its original essence. This is a cold hell, without the purifying or destructive flames, and without the visible presence of demons inflicting physical suffering. There is no explicit torture, only the torture of existential alienation. There is solely a soul looking into the mirror of its own existence and not recognizing itself, imprisoned in the cell of its own denial and self-deception. The most terrible and dangerous kind of despair, as Kierkegaard argued with a terrifying lucidity, is precisely the kind that doesn't even know it's in despair. It's a state of denial so profound that the pain itself is camouflaged, anesthetized. It manifests in the rehearsed laugh, a laugh that doesn't come from genuine joy, but from a social script to please. It reveals itself in success that doesn't fulfill, an accomplishment empty of personal meaning, leaving the soul even more hollow. It is found in the peace that is actually a profound emotional anesthesia, a flight from the reality of one's own suffering. And, most insidiously, it emerges in the automatic, mechanical, "I'm fine," a standardized response that hides an inner chaotic turmoil. Behind this curtain of normalcy and social acceptance, deep within the soul living this charade, exists a silent scream. It's a profound lament, a muffled plea that no one in the external world can hear, not even the person emitting it. And God? Where is God in this scenario of invisible despair? Kierkegaard states that God is not distant, that the divine presence is constant and available. However, the person has become incapable of listening to him, because to do so would require an act of courage and authenticity, to silence the carefully constructed lie, to break the character that has become a prison, to tear up the social role that suffocates the inner truth, and finally, to descend into the darkest basement of the soul, where the true essence was locked away and forgotten. Only in this deep dive can the voice of God, which manifests in truth and authenticity, be perceived. This introspective and painful journey, this confrontation with the silent hell, is far more frightening than the traditional conception of hell, with its demons and flames. This is because the hell Kierkegaard describes is an existential place, where the person still possesses the freedom of choice, the ability to act and decide, but, paradoxically, uses this freedom precisely to continue deceiving themselves, to maintain the facade and the inauthenticity. They hold the key to liberation in their own hands, the possibility of freeing themselves from the chains of despair and alienation, but they stubbornly refuse to open the door of their own prison. The light of truth and authenticity is within their reach, shining softly within them, but the person chooses to close their eyes out of pride, out of fear of confronting their own fragility, their own limitation, and the need for dependence on something greater. This is, in its essence, the most cruel and ironic hell, the soul that intrinsically could be saved, that has the capacity to redeem itself and find wholeness, but vehemently refuses to do so. It is the soul that could return to its fullness, its authenticity, and its connection with the divine, but prefers, by its own choice and a painful attachment to the mask, to continue performing an empty play, a drama of appearances that consumes it from within. Faced with this powerful and uncomfortable Kierkegaardian analysis, we are compelled to a sincere self-assessment. Are you, on some level, acting in your own life? Do you live predominantly for the gaze of others, for external validation, for social recognition, for the perception of being successful in the eyes of others? How many of the smiles you give out daily are genuine, born of authentic joy, and how many are just a part of your performance script? How many "I'm fines," uttered in casual conversations, are truly authentic? And how many are just automatic reflexes of a society that values superficiality? And in a moment of deep introspection, how many mirrors can you face without feeling shame, discomfort, or a profound sense of strangeness regarding the image reflected back? Kierkegaard warns us, in a categorical and urgent way, that hell is not a distant promise to be fulfilled after physical death, an inevitable destination. For sinners, it is a present reality, an existential condition that may be developing and deepening now, at this very moment, within you. It manifests slowly, silently, and often invisibly to the external observer, but it is devastating in its effects on the soul. Because what is at stake in this hell is not the body, which is finite and perishable, but the soul, the immortal essence of being, and it is breaking, fragmenting, and disintegrating each time you deny the truth of who you are in your relationship with God, with the divine, with your own essence. The way out of this hell exists and is possible, but it requires a deep and transformative death. To die to the character you have built, to die to the lie you live and sustain, to die to the pride that prevents you from recognizing your fragility and dependence. And then, to be reborn as one who accepts, with humility and courage, to be a true self, a fragile, limited being, and, paradoxically, infinitely dependent on a God who does not impose his will in an authoritarian way, but who waits patiently, with love and acceptance. Hell, ultimately, Kierkegaard said, is to continue being anything but what you were created to be, what your deepest essence yearns to be. And the greatest tragedy is that one day, you might wake up to this frightening truth, look around in the emptiness of your soul, and realize with despairing anguish that you no longer know how to get back to your own inner home.